Gentlemen, on behalf of Pan Macmillan India, I take great pleasure in welcoming you all to the launch of the 10th anniversary edition of Ramachandra Guha's India After Gandhi. We welcome Ramachandra Guha and Barkha Dutt and request them to please come on stage. We first published India After Gandhi in 2007 and it quickly established itself as a classic. This anniversary edition brings the narrative up to the present, chronicling the events of the last 10 years, including the fall of the Congress, the rise of Narendra Modi, Anna Hazare's anti-corruption movement, rising violence against women, Dalits and religious minorities, prosperity for some while continuing poverty for others, and much else. This book is relevant now more than ever before, as we have become a democracy where politics constantly falls prey to corruption, criminality, fake news and dogma. However, even though obituaries have been written time and again for the Indian democracy, it has persisted against all odds. India can thus be called a 50-50 democracy, a point Ram brilliantly illustrates in this book. On that note, we would like to thank Ramachandra Guha for giving us this outstanding modern classic. A scholar of great stature, a kind and generous human being, his entire career, he says, seems in retrospect to have been an extended and rather painful preparation for the writing of this book. We would also like to thank Barkha Dutt for joining us today to be in conversation with Ram. An extraordinary journalist and columnist, Barkha is an inspiration to many. I now welcome Ram and Barkha to unveil the book. Thank you, Ram and Barkha. May I now request Ram to say a few words.
Thank you, Sushmita. Thank you all for coming here. This book was not my idea. 20 years ago, I got a phone call in Bangalore from Rajdeep Mukherjee, who's somewhere in the audience, who runs Pan Macmillan, who's one of the most efficient and capable publishers in this country, and certainly the most self-effacing, which is why you won't see him, he's hiding somewhere. But he called me and said, I want you to meet Peter Strauss. I had not heard of Peter Strauss. But he was insistent that I meet this gentleman visiting from London. I did a little bit of research. This is pre-Google days, but I was able to find out that Peter Strauss ran an imprint called Picador, which had published B.S. Naipaul and Michael Ondaatje, among others, and for some reason he wanted to meet me. At that stage, I was an academic historian writing scholarly works burdened with many footnotes. So we met in a hotel in this city, and Peter Strauss was carrying a copy of an Oxford historical journal called Past and Present. About 5 people in this room may have heard of that journal, maybe 3. One of them is sitting in the second row, and he's Mr. Jairam Ramesh, but I'm not sure how many others. And he was carrying this scholarly arcane journal in which I had published a scholarly arcane article. And he picked up the journal and said, what are you doing? I said, converting that essay into a book. That essay was on caste and cricket in colonial India. And he said, no, don't do that. Write a history of independent India. I said, what? This is 1997. He said, write a history of independent India. It's 50 years since your country was founded. It's been a remarkable, tumultuous journey. You're becoming more important on the world stage. 1997, we were becoming more important on the world stage. Narendra Modi was not Chief Minister of Gujarat, by the way, back then. But this publisher sensed that we were becoming important on the world stage. Write a history of independent India. It's clear that you enjoy research and you should be not just writing for past and present, which 3.5 people read. So I said, I think about it. And I went back to Bangalore, and he called me a month later, and I said, well, sounds interesting, unusual, exciting. So he said, write a proposal. I wrote a proposal, and I got a contract with a manuscript due in 2001. This was early 1998. And then the enormity of the project struck me. Where do I begin? Where are the materials for such a work? As those of you who are students or have been students in Indian universities know, when midnight struck on 15th August 1947, history ended and political science began. So there was a lot of work on the history of colonial India, on Gandhi versus the Raj, but virtually nothing on independent India. So I began the work of looking for materials. The National Archives at that stage had very little. Now it has much more, particularly because of the activities of Mushirul Hasan, who, when he was Director General of the National Archives, went from ministry to get material shifted there. But in 1997 or 98, there was nothing. Fortunately, the Nehru Museum had the papers of some remarkable, influential Indians, and I began work, looking at old newspapers, documents, and the notebooks filled up, but I didn't know how to make sense of it. And for a long time, the notes I made and the drafts I wrote were in a folder in my computer called Mythical History Book, because I never thought this book would be written. Eventually, the draft came out. It was 4 years beyond the deadline. It was also twice as long as the word limit. I'd been told that if you want to write a history of independent India, Indians don't read big books unless they're mythological works. And certainly the Brits and the Americans don't have a stomach for large works on India. But unfortunately, the publisher could cut only 5,000 words from the manuscript, and that mastodon of 900 pages was published 10 years ago. And is now out in a new edition. As Suspita mentioned, a lot has happened in the last 10 years. The rise of Narendra Modi, the fall and possibly terminal decline of the Congress Party, relative peace in Nagaland, but further and even greater discontent in Kashmir. In fact, Kashmir is in some ways the bookend of the book, the two bookends. And my last chapter of the new edition, before the epilogue, ends by quoting Sardar Patel, who in 1949 told his friend G.D. Birla, "We are having a severe headache in Kashmir." And clearly 70 years later, we still are. By we, he meant the Indian establishment, the state of India. So there's also new material on gender, on caste, on the rise of a gay rights movement, and the progressive judgment of the Delhi High Court, and shall we say the not so progressive judgment of the Supreme Court, which overturned it. So it's substantially revised, especially the later parts. The epilogue returns to a theme that was expressed in the first edition, where I argue that India has a 50-50 democracy. And I still believe we have a 50-50 democracy. In some areas, they are manifest and increasing democratic deficits, particularly with the functioning of public institutions. The politicization of the bureaucracy, the criminalization of the political class, the decline of other public institutions, curbs on freedom of the press. But in other areas, actually, Indians have become more free. I think two areas in which we have slowly become more free is that there has been a steady delinking of caste from occupation and of family from marriage. So the thing in writing a history of independent India is that, of course, the nuance and the detail is very important, but one must not succumb either to the facile apocalyptic talk about India going down the tube, nor indeed the jingoistic chest thumping about India about to claim its place as leader of the world. Just two things in conclusion. I look forward to my conversation with Barkha on some of the themes of the book. Two things in conclusion. One is that yesterday there was a terror attack in Anantnag. And this book starts with the horrific partition violence. And it argues, something I'll argue at greater length in my forthcoming biography of Mahatma Gandhi, that in many ways Gandhi's martyrdom saved India. Hindus were horrified at what they had done. Patel and Nehru, who were fighting bitterly and viciously, buried their differences. Now, arguably, it's of course we are not reaching the scale of partition violence, But these are troubled times. Religious pluralism was always going to be hard won in India, and we have to be vigilant. We have to make sure that India stays true to the founding ideals of its republic. That it will never be a Hindu Pakistan. That a single religion or a single language or a common enemy will never define the contours of what it means to be an Indian. So that's one thing I'd like to say in conclusion. And the other is on a lighter note. Those of you, maybe not so many in this room, but many more outside in the wider world, who are, I meet every day on Twitter and other forums. As I said, hopefully not in this room but outside, will probably, their main target should not be me, but it should be Peter Strauss, the publisher who brought me out of the academic ghetto 20 years ago. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The most interesting part for me in rereading India After Gandhi on its 10th anniversary edition was how prophetic and timely some of the themes actually seem. Nationalism. Who defines nationalism? What is nationalism? The rise of populist politics. Who would have thought that we were actually living at a time of this actually being not just an Indian phenomenon, but a global phenomenon. Individual liberties and what happens when it collides with a larger social sentiment, something that comes in the backdrop of so-called cow protectors and beef politics. And whether the BJP has, in a sense, taken the place of what Rajni Kothari famously called the Congress system. So much to talk about. We are going to want to keep this as interactive as possible. But I want to start, Ram, with the epilogue, the end of the book. And one of the questions you raise is about the quality of India's democracy. That we are a democracy is not in doubt. But are we a full democracy? Are we an evolving democracy? Are we still a democracy finding our direction? And you use Johnny Walker to say 50-50, 50-50. Which is the 50 that works and which is the 50 that doesn't?
Well, the 50 that works is the election part. So they are free and fair elections. But we are in danger of becoming, that works. Also, we have freedom of association. We can choose our friends, whom to hang around with. We can protest on the streets, hopefully non-violently. And we can move across India. In totalitarian regimes, the movements of citizens are controlled. Right. So I think in these respects we are democratic. But we are in danger of becoming what I call in the new edition an elections-only democracy. So what happens between elections in the 5 years, and this is true not only at the central level, but it's true at the state level. In fact, in some ways the arbitrary, capricious, authoritarian behavior of leaders is manifest more in the states than the center. Of course, it's clearly manifest in the center as well. So, public institutions, I think, for example, the institutions that we value as free and fair are the Election Commission, that largely retains its reputation. The judiciary, mostly but not fully. The army, again, mostly but not fully. The Reserve Bank, after demonetization, I'm not sure.
I don't know what you're going to say about the media.
The media, I am not as critical of the media or self-critical of the media as some people. I think maybe because I live in Bangalore. Now, Bangalore gives you a distance of different kinds.
Come and live here, we'll tell you what we feel.
Okay. So it clearly, they are clearly the sections of the television media hurt India by their jingoism. I think this is a wonderful statement, which is quoted in the book, of Shah Faisal, a remarkable IAS officer in Kashmir, who wrote at the time of the new troubles in Kashmir, the beginnings, he said, every hour of prime time aggression on television sends many Kashmiris westwards. This is not, westwards is not only towards Pakistan, but towards Saudi Arabia. Right? So I think they're clear, but I think there are sections of the print media that are still free. I think there's some very good websites. So clearly it could be, I don't think it's as bleak. Again, with the media, I think the real danger is in small towns, in Indian languages. You and I are free to say what we want about our leaders. But someone in Dharwad writing about sand mining and the links between the local MLA and the sand miner is in danger of his life or her life.
No,
so in that sense, the media I won't be apocalyptic. Sure, clearly there are deficiencies. But I think the areas in which I would be apocalyptic are the civil service and the bureaucracy, which is increasingly politicized. and the police, which is arbitrary and often violent, and the criminal justice system. I mean, whenever I hear a party spokesman say the law will take its course, ask Vijay Mallya about the law will take its course. Or Lalit Modi.
The way the law takes its own course is a flight to London, basically.
That's right. Yeah. Or the poor people. What happens to poor people? The state of our under trials. You know, the fact that Dalits and Muslims are overwhelmingly represented among those often accused falsely of violent crimes. So I think these are things.
What is the one institution that you find the weakest in India that you believe should be stronger in a truly democratic country?
You know, Barkha, I have always resisted privileging one institution, one cause,
okay,
one leader.
Name four, name five.
I'd say the criminal justice system, the civil service, the police, and the lower courts, including the High Court, and possibly even elements of the Supreme Court. I think so. These are the 3 or 4 institutions that I worry about. I think the media also. The media is secondary. I think these are we're talking about public institutions, you know, and we have outstanding civil servants. This book. I mean, 2 of the heroes of this book, of the original edition, were Sukumar Sen, who built our election system, and Tarlok Singh, who successfully resettled the Punjabi refugees. Now, there are some outstanding civil servants in this room, you know, and I have 2 or 3 really outstanding civil servants. But they are my age or older. I mean, will you find the same capability in the 30s and 40s, and who have the courage and the independence to act in that way? So, I think these are things, and also again, to say, at one level, being in Bangalore makes you more optimistic, but also more pessimistic, because state governments are even more malevolent sometimes than central governments.
But you know, when you just said that political science began where history ended in 1947, everything that we've understood about ourselves is benchmarked against our colonial history, even the language we're conversing in right now. But if I were to look at what's really happening in democracies across the world, including in India, I would argue that actually we're getting more and more Americanized. And whether it's, and you refer to this, personality-centric politics, a more presidential form of politics, or whether it's even the media, there's a certain sort of populism and polarity that is driving the conversation. So do you believe that the India of 2017 is more American than British?
It is, but it could be in some ways in good ways too. You know, America is not all dark and evil, right?
America's institutional freedoms are much more evolved than us.
Institutional freedoms, Barkha. For example, I think feminism is completely antithetical to the Indian ethos. Equality for women is antithetical to Hinduism and Islam, full stop. And whatever cherry picking you may do, whatever cherry picking you may do from the Quran or the Vedas, forget it, right? And it's the feminist movement in America and the UK that has made many of us more sensitive. And you know, you fought those battles yourself, right? That's one area. The other area in which maybe it's good that we're becoming more American is entrepreneurship, which is no longer restricted to a particular caste or no longer restricted to family businesses. Now, that's a second area in which I think America could have had a salutary effect. A third area in which America could have had a salutary effect is that for the first time we have rich Indians who are giving back to society. In the past it was only the Parsis, you know, and the Parsis are the unique and the best of all, among all Indians, and maybe because in most respects they're not Indians at all, right? Right. So, beyond the Tatas and the Godrejes, you have the Nilekanis and the Premjis are in many ways influenced by the Gates and the Buffetts, right? So I think the interesting thing about India is that it adapts stupid things from America, but also maybe sometimes ennobling and democratic things. So some aspects of America, you know, I grew up as a leftist in Calcutta hating America, right? Now, the first day I went to America, I found, I had a job at an American university, and I was introduced to the dean of my department on the Friday. Saturday was a holiday. And I went for a walk in my university, which I was about to join, and I saw the dean of a great American university, a dean of a famous school, stopping his car on a Sunday morning. I was looking at him, opened the boot, took out a huge carton weighing 30 kilos and carried up 3 flights. Now my father and grandfather both ran research institutes. And if they had a file with a single paper, 3 chaprasis would be there waiting for them to take it up. Right? Now, so I think the interesting thing about how social change works in India, it's always nuanced, it's always complex, it's always 50-50.
Anything is always 50-50.
Too many things are 50-50. Yeah.
Now, there's a chapter in this book that's called The Rise of the BJP System. And, you know, for those of us with a little bit of cursory political science, you're obviously referencing Rajni Kothari and the Congress system, and the whole notion of one-party domination. But Rajni Kothari, of course, wrote about a time when the hegemony was occupied by the Congress party. And you've made the argument that that hegemony has been replaced today by the BJP. So are we essentially a country or a democracy that is a one-party polity at any given time? The parties could change, but it's the domination of one party.
That's a very interesting question, Barkha. And again, you know, I'd like to answer that partly at the central level, partly at the state level. So clearly we've been going 70 years. And we failed in emulating the stable two-party model of Western democracies. You know, the Swatantra Party wanted to do it, then the BJP wanted to do it, the Janata Party wanted to do it, and I think no one has any illusions that the Congress can ever become a major party again. So we are clearly not gone towards a two-party system. We've gone from one.
You're saying the Congress cannot come back from this?
So
ever, or for the next 15 years?
You see,
10 years?
I hate to get into prediction.
No, because you said never. You used the word never, so I'm pushing you.
I think that Congress, you know, the best case scenario of the Congress would be to go from 44 to 100. But that may be a best case scenario, right? Now, if they have a new leader or new leadership tomorrow, things could change. 2 years is a long time in politics. If they kick out the Gandhi family, they may have a better future. Right. Now, but that's not going to happen. You know, you can fantasize. I mean, I have my own fantasy which I'd like to share with you.
Which is?
My fantasy is that there is a genuine leader in India. That is Nitish Kumar. He is a leader without a party. The Congress is a party without a leader. Now, if Nitish Kumar, if there could be a friendly takeover, but this is not.
I don't know if at this point I should get Jairam Ramesh into the conversation. Because he's sitting right there looking bashful for once in his life. But
let me bring it out more seriously. So, and you're right, I want to make one important point, which is not facetious but scholarly and serious.
Yeah.
See, you're right, that it appears that we are oscillating from Congress system to BJP system at the central level.
Yes.
But I think the importance of a two-party rivalry at the states should not be underappreciated. You know, there are people who are they are political scientists in the front of Devesh Kapoor is here, and there are others who know this much better than me. But as an outsider, it strikes me that the 3 states in India, which in my view, and I think some of the economists in this room will agree with me, the 3 states in India that have performed the best over a 70-year period in terms of economic and social indicators are Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Himachal Pradesh. And all have relatively stable two-party systems. Bengal ruled by 40 years by the left is a disaster. Gujarat being ruled by 25 years by the BJP is a disaster for Gujaratis. So the states that have stable two-party systems do the best. I mean, because the Congress is a check on the communists in Kerala, the Congress is a check on the BJP in Himachal, and where power alternates. So maybe we should focus on the states and build good two-party systems.
But I want to push you on your Nitish,
yeah.
The great hope that you see in Nitish.
It's a fantasy.
It's a fantasy, but your fantasy went so far as to compare him to Barack Obama. I remember this.
Casual.
Yeah. You colloquially said, you know, who's the Obama of India? It's Nitish Kumar. But you know, when Indian liberals make Nitish, you know, our great hope in some ways, then are you foisting a greatness on him that he has actually not displayed? He has what you once called struck a Faustian deal with Lalu Prasad Yadav, who has been convicted of corruption. He has absolutely dithered on every position and not taken a clear side. He's hedging his bets right now. We don't know if the alliance is going to last. We don't know if he may even return to the BJP. So what is it about Nitish Kumar that appeals to you ideologically?
No, I think I would say that he is like Modi, he has no family burden. Right? Unlike Modi, he is not megalomaniac. Right? Okay. He is not sectarian. Even when he was the Vajpayee government, all the journalists who covered him said he is not sectarian. He focuses on gender, which is rare among Indian politicians. So there are things about him that appeal. But I think, objectively, what the remark I made about him was 7 or 8 years ago when we had this conversation on the same stage when Makers of Modern India came back. Right. Now he's aged. Now he must be late 60s. So my fantasy is of no relevance to the young people in this room or to the India of the future. But But maybe there could be a Macron-like phenomenon. You know, it's hard to say what will emerge. But clearly, there is a problem with single-party dominance. Single-party dominance made even the great Democrat Jawaharlal Nehru arrogant and impervious to criticism. Single-party dominance made the instinctively authoritarian Indira Gandhi even more authoritarian. So what single-party dominance will do to Narendra Modi and Amit Shah, I started to think, right? So it's not good for democracy to have single-party dominance, as Nehru's and Indira Gandhi's examples show. So how it comes, where it comes, you know, the people of India will decide. But Nitish Kumar is sadly, as I said, he is one Indian politician I have sympathy with for many reasons. But I think he is probably, he has no future, because unless the Congress party invites him to become president. Because then, president of the party, because then you have a leader without a party taking over a party without a leader. Right. So that is the only fantasy, and maybe some friends in this room can convey to the past that we, all right, and it can happen, but it won't happen. So Nitish is, as I said, for several reasons, not least that a very dear and close friend of mine, whom I shall not identify, works in Bihar. And I have heard many good things about the work they've been doing in Bihar. And also, by the way, I know that from Nitish empowered the best bureaucrats in Bihar. Not those who are from the same caste, who would do his bidding, who would give him a cut on contracts. I think by and large he chose the best. So there are many things about him that are appealing, were appealing. But unless Sonia Gandhi asks him to succeed her, there is no future for him in Indian politics.
For Nitish or for Sonia Gandhi?
Probably both.
But, you know, do you feel that basically when you scratch the surface of this 50-50 democracy in India, there is a dangerous kind of appetite for strongman politics? And it hasn't emerged with Prime Minister Modi.
You're right.
Indira Gandhi and Narendra Modi in some ways could be interchangeable figures in the admiration they evoke among so many people for being authoritarian in personality.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the state level again, I mean, Barkha Dutt, who was of course never chief minister but had the remote, Mamata Banerjee, Arvind Kejriwal, who's been a deep disappointment to many of his supporters, partly because of his megalomania. You know, a person who cannot get along with someone as intelligent, as sensitive, and as reasonable as Yogendra Yadav has a problem with himself. You know, so I'd say all of this. So I think, you know, in the book, Barkha, in an early chapter of the book, I quote Ambedkar's prophetic warning in the Constituent Assembly, where he says, Bhakti in religion is a road to the salvation of the soul. Bhakti in politics is a road to dictatorship. Now, sadly, he himself has fallen victim to that Bhakti because Dalit intellectuals can't see a single flaw in him. So this is a real issue. You know.
Isn't every party defined by that kind of thing? It's the Gandhis and the Congress is Mamata, Arvind, you know, Prime Minister Modi.
Again, I say Nitish is not megalomaniac. Maybe Naveen Patnaik is also not, though of course he is even different. So I think, but you're right, that it is this, but by the way, again, at this
charismatic leaders are usually
yes, you are right. And also
representing strongman politics.
I would also say, Barkha, that it goes beyond politics. I mean, in this bhakti that Ambedkar recognized, this uncritical, adulated tendency among Indians to put ordinary mortals on a pedestal reserved for great gods, right, is not restricted to politics. It is very much there in business, and as I found in my recent experiences, certainly then cricket. Right? So, this is an issue. So, in that respect, it's the 50% of democracy where we aren't there. Because you set up, I mean, the British. But you know, it may be changing. One of the nice things I now see on social media is, and I hope that, you know, it's not police or censored, is satire about famous people. And the British had it in spades. I think one of the reasons the British are so great and democratic is that they make fun of their most, and we must develop that. I think it's bhakti not just in politics but in business. I mean, the aura around our successful entrepreneurs, I mean, the worshipful stories done on them in the business press, not only about them but their spouses, their children, their cars, their houses, their cats, their dogs, whatever else, right? Now, I think there is a real issue with cricket. I mean, of course I venerate cricketers, but I would never treat them as superhuman. I mean, to me, the great Indians are, you know, people like Chandi Prasad Bhatt of the Chipko movement, Ela Bhatt of Seva, these are people whom I would venerate because they're transforming society. Someone who can score 100 against West Indies, okay, nice, good entertainment for me, but that's it.
I mean, I dare not say anything because I'm not a cricket bhakt, but I recognize myself to be marginal in those ways. But I mean, I'm segueing and diverting here. But what was your experience being a in cricket administration? Is that off limits?
One day I write a tell-all.
Strengthen institutional freedom of speech and tell us. Come on.
One day I write a tell-all memoir, but the time has not come.
Why did you leave it?
No, my resignation letter said it all. I left for 2 or 3 reasons. One is I felt that our committee should have pushed much harder at the reforms. And I think by leaving, I think I've given them more strength. After I left, the conflict of interest issue was addressed. And now you can't be an IPL coach and a national coach. Also, I think the superstar culture is nauseating. I mean, I think this is something that, essentially as a Democrat, and also the last reason I left was I said when I joined, I said, please get a capable cricketer who knows administration. And I wish they would get, I mean, I don't want to name names, but there are 2 or 3 cricketers who would be much better at that committee than I am, and we should get them in. But that's another story. I mean, it's not about. Let's talk about this book. Yeah.
So the book is not writing about this moment when it's actually exploring the phenomenon of populism. And even when you mentioned earlier about this jingoism on television channels, and as somebody who's kind of devoted her reporting life to Kashmir, I agree with you that the single biggest damage to the idea of India in the Valley is the English news primetime anchor. But there can be no denying the fact that populism, by definition, it's a truism, works because it reflects a larger sentiment, a larger mood, right? So, for example, when we had the whole debate about a human shield tied to the front of a jeep, you were one of those who said, look, I understand that the army was in a difficult position, but you don't have to necessarily reward this soldier, right? That's visually true. But if you went out and you asked 80% of India, I suspect, would say, "Bahut acha kiya." Har Kashmiri ko utha ke kar. Let's do this to every Kashmiri. Now, what does a democracy do when larger sentiment is pushing it in a certain direction?
I think the task of a statesman is to go against majority opinion. Firstly, I don't believe this is a majority opinion. I don't believe, again, South India, East India may tell a different story. Right. So first, it may be large sections are hungry for vengeance and retribution. But it may not be. Secondly, if a large chunk of popular opinion is against civility, decency, humanity, constitutional values, it's the task of our leaders to educate them, to contain them. That's what Jawaharlal Nehru did in 47, 48. Otherwise, we would not be speaking here today. Right? And today, the most heartening thing today was Rajnath Singh's tweet.
Yes.
Right? Where he said that all Kashmiris have condemned it, which shows Kashmir is alive. It was a very statesman-like remark, going against the grain of what his party faithful want. And it should be endorsed. I was disappointed that Ram Madhav did not lead people. He's a BJP. If Ram, I was disappointed. I hope he does it tomorrow. He may not do it because I say it, but he should do it tomorrow. I think that was a remark of someone who has the interest of civility, humanity, and the Indian Republic at heart. Right? Now, so I think the task of a great leader, Nitish Kumar is not a great leader.
But who is a great leader?
Who
is a great leader who went against the grain of popular sentiment?
Nitish Kumar is not a great leader. But let me tell you that there are fine Bihari intellectuals sitting here, and they will agree with me when I tell them that Bihar is much more patriarchal than Karnataka and Kerala. But he went against the patriarchy and tried to empower young women. Right? Which was, so that is the, so when, see, there are examples around the world, and modest things. Like I think, we will go up in flames, Barkha, if we set Hindu against Muslim, it is just a terrible and tragic thing. I mean, it'll help no one. You may win a few elections, but over a train of dead bodies, right? So I think, in that sense, particularly populism, the Anna Hazare movement was also a populist movement. Some people felt it was too populist, it should have taken a constitutional form, but it was not, promoting violence. There were legitimate criticisms being made of the Anna-Hazare movement. But it was, so but when, when a political party, I believe that the jihadis in Kashmir, that their best friends are the Gao Gundas and the Hindutvawadis, and vice versa. Let's be clear about this, right? Fundamentally,
but
so,
are they comparable? Are they actually comparable?
Well, it depends.
Because one is again a kind of institutionalized, trained terrorism. Well, there is no other word for it.
Yes,
right?
Yes. But it's like this. They are comparable in this sense. In India, Islamic terrorism is a threat to humanity and civility worldwide. So at the global level, Islamic terrorism is far more dangerous than any other kind of religious terrorism. But within India, where Hindus are a majority, and outside Kashmir, in Kashmir, Hindus have historically been persecuted and been the victim. But everywhere else in India, it's the Muslims and the Christians. And we should worry about this. I think these are things that, so what if 80%, so what if, so-and-so channel has more viewership than a more super channel? No. I mean, vengeance, retribution, hatred, how can you build a great country on those lines? Pakistan tried. You want to become like Pakistan?
But give me an example of a moment you remember from recent history. I'm not talking about the Constituent Assembly debates, I'm not talking about Nehru and Gandhi, where a contemporary politician that we all remember went against the grain of popular opinion and took a decision. No, because it was the right decision.
I think the small things they can add up. I think the Home Minister's tweet was heartening. I think Nitish Kumar going against patriarchy was heartening. I think civil society must play a role. I think even Indira Gandhi, the fact that after the emergency, when she was an MP, and the amendments introduced by Morarji Desai and Shanti Bhushan, restoring the original character of the Constitution, she approved it and told her party, you must vote for this. Right? It's a moment of recognition that you were wrong. Right? And I think these are things that you could do. I mean, see, you're not looking for great heroic acts. You're looking for small acts. Obviously, an Ambedkar or a Gandhi is not going to reappear. Clearly, that's not going to happen, right? But I think small acts by people. I think, again, this may be more common in South India than in North India. But I think there are people in Kerala who are in public life who would not deliberately pit, one community against another. Even if it loses them an election, they won't take that line. So I think I would not be so despairing. Because again, I feel that democracy is not only about elections. It's about, I've said in a recent column, that even if our politicians don't believe in constitutional patriotism, tens of millions of ordinary Indians do. Right? So in that sense, they'll have to assert themselves. Will they find a party vehicle, a political vehicle? That we'll have to see.
But one of the hallmarks of a democracy is the ability of people to talk to each other. Not just for us to be able to sit here and talk, but to talk across the aisle, as it were. Those conversations, the space for those conversations has shrunk. Today, even in drawing rooms, you will actually end up coming to near blows if you try and have a political conversation. So how did we come to this space where the only way we can talk is in binaries?
No, I agree. That's shrunk, and I think that social media plays a role in polarizing things. The decline of Parliament is saddening. I mean, my book would not have been written without the richness and the flavor of the parliamentary debates of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. So all of that is, but young people will find new ways. I mean, democracy will reinvent itself. I mean, I'm sure. And again, you see the extremes grab the headlines, Barkha Dutt, right? But that doesn't mean that they capture the popular vote. Necessarily, represent the feelings of ordinary.
Do elections capture the popular mood, or not necessarily?
No, they do to some extent. I think elections, of course, there is an issue with election finance, with criminalization, but by and large, relatively, they're quite free. I think on elections, since we talk about elections, I'm sorry to be plugging my hometown so much here, but lots of good things happen in Bangalore, which are invisible in Delhi. And like the philanthropist I talked about, and one more thing, a remarkable thing that has roots in Bangalore and in Delhi is the Association of Democratic Reforms, which has argued that we should adopt a model where in every election, the winning candidate needs 50% plus one vote. So shall we say there's an election for Central Delhi?
And there are 4 candidates, because in India normally there are multiple candidates, so with 30% of the vote you win, because the next guy gets 25, then 20, then 20. ADR says have a rerun at once, and with electronic voting you can do it. So 1 and 2 have a runoff. And the person who gets more than 50% is elected MLA from Central Delhi. Now what this will do is it will force candidates to go beyond identity politics. You know, non-Chamar Dalit plus non-Yadav OBC plus non-so-and-so Brahmin plus so-and-so. And because you 35, and to say more than, you have to get more than 50% of the vote, so it will be Bijli Sadak Pani, transparency, good governance. Now that's a fantastic suggestion. Now if this is taken aboard, I think the quality of our public debate will change. If you need a majority of votes to win your seat, you will no longer campaign on sectarian lines. So I think they are Indians who are, they may not be represented in politics. They may not be on those obnoxious TV channels that neither you and I want to name. But they are around. And they've got interesting, unusual, innovative, creative ideas. And, you know, they should be taken forward.
But the reason I asked you about elections is that if we accept that elections are one barometer and a reasonably good, accurate barometer of what public sentiment is, and we also accept your own formulation that the BJP is now what the BJP's politics what the Congress was, and in the near future you see a hegemony of the BJP, then it does raise questions for the failure of liberal, and I'm using this in quotes because I'm going to push you and say there is no really liberal party in this country, but the failure of liberal politics in India. I think liberals across the world are grappling with this question. It's not unique to India, I know that. But there is a sense of the echo chamber syndrome of liberals, the St. Stephen's College sort of trap, where you're, you feel like you're talking clever things to each other. But you're not addressing anybody outside of that little club.
No, you're right when it comes again to electoral politics, to sections of the media that are obsessed with elections and nothing else.
Yeah.
Right? But I think in everyday life in society, as I said, in some areas India is becoming more liberal. You know, my daughter has more freedoms than my wife did. Right? Dalits today are still deeply exploited. But they're less exploited than they were 50 or 70 years ago. Because there's a delinking of caste from occupation. But and the more we urbanize, the more these freedoms will be expanded. But so I think we need an expansive sociological understanding of democracy in which elections are an important part, but not the only part. So and from that point, I mean, and again, this may be a, I live in a, in a part of India which has less violence, communal and gender violence. It has it, but less. So maybe that's colored the way I look at it. But I think, which is why India for me is still a 50-50 democracy. It is not, India is a work in progress. Again, and I sometimes make this, remark in jest, but it's actually true. If India was a startup in 1947, not even the most enlightened venture capitalist, the most optimistic venture capitalist would have invested in it. Right? No, because it was doomed to fail. Now, it has stayed, it has survived, it is, and again, this is to go back to the epilogue of the book. There were 2 great experiments we started with. One is unifying a country that is so diverse. 2, empowering your citizenry with the vote who were illiterate. So there was the national experiment, and there was the democratic experiment. The democratic experiment is 50-50, but the national experiment may be 90-10. Apart from Kashmir is 1 state out of 29, and it's only the valley. So parts of Kashmir, parts of Manipur, parts of Nagaland. And fortunately the Maoists are declining in influence. I mean, if you compare our nation building experiment with Spain, with France, with Britain, with America, let alone the African countries, and you think of the civil wars they had. So, I think we've been a modest success. I think we could have done much better, but we could have also done a lot worse. And most people thought at our birth that we would survive, that 70 years ago or later, we would be discussing this ongoing experiment in this open-minded, critical way. I think, this is, it took the battle today. I think we were very lucky in the quality of the people who founded us. A nation needs visionaries to found us. We have written off the opposition. They have written off themselves. Right? However, the BJP has to contend with the living legacy of Nehru and Ambedkar. the constitutional values and Gandhi, the constitutional values they bequeath us, which are encoded in our everyday thought, in our institutions, in our habits, in our practices, our mores, are still there. And they will continue to challenge the Hindutva majoritarianism and the authoritarianism of BJP. Right? So I think that is the battle. And it's a complex story, and the last word has been said. But I will, I'm maybe slightly less optimistic than I was 10 years ago when I wrote this book. Only slightly less. And that may be because I'm 60 years old and old farts tend to be pessimistic. Right? Then I was 15, I'm saying, but only slightly less optimistic.
Let me unpack bit by bit, because you've said a lot of different things, and I want to bring up the notion of personal liberty, because you do say this in the book and you just said it again, that today in some ways individual liberties, there are more liberties available to an individual than they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But we are fighting all the time about what we can eat, what we can drink, and whom we can love or have sex with. 377, prohibition, beef ban. I'm not saying these are products of this time. These have been ongoing debates. But your favorite, Nitish Kumar, one of my big disagreements with him, is prohibition.
I think the most dangerous among these is the beef ban. Right. I think prohibition I not studied. And,
but the idea that the state should determine, and I know it's done in the name of women and I support, I know.
But I think the beef ban, because the beef ban stigmatizes a community. That's why it is particularly multiple communities. Not just Muslims, but Christians, but Adivasis, Dalits. No. So I think the beef ban is the most dangerous and pernicious. On sexual freedoms, despite the horrific and ill-informed judgment of Justice Singhvi, actually, gays are freer than they were before. Because society has changed. Society has changed. And society. So, but the most obnoxious, I think, is that is a real worry. It's also dividing society, and it's in many ways it is comparable to what happened in the late 80s and early 90s over the mosque. I mean, a property dispute in a single small North Indian town, made life miserable for hundreds of millions of Indians who had never seen a Ayodhya. Right? And this beef ban is making life miserable for millions of Indians who don't even eat meat. Because of the uncertainty, the violence, the stigmatizing, all that goes with it. So, they always, as I said, the thing about India is so large, so diverse. Change is never unilinear. It's always complex. We progress in some areas, we regress in some areas, and we'll have to fight these small battles as we go along.
But do you find a distinction in the positions taken by political parties on beef ban? And the reason I'm asking this is, I still remember Digvijay Singh getting up and saying, but the Congress did this first. We put this ban on in 23 of the states.
I absolutely agree, and that is where the example of Nehru is important. Because Nehru and Gandhi had the moral courage to stand up to the bigots in their own community. And that is something which the Congress party, this B team of Hindutva and all, that was the greatness of Nehru and Gandhi. There's a wonderful editorial written by Faiz Ahmad Faid when Gandhi died, where he says this. He says the greatness of Gandhi was he stood up to the people in his own community who was so hot, and I think that is something which we are losing. This is where I think also the courts are to blame. I think Hindus are becoming more Islamic in their adoption of blasphemy law. My name is Ram. Do you know whom I'm named after? Though on Twitter I'm told all the time I should be called something else. Right?
Well, at least you're not told that you should be called Barkha, which is what I'm told.
But one of the nicest statements made, most interesting, this Ram Setu controversy that happened, right? Now, Karunanidhi, who was reared in the old atheistic tradition of Periyar, and being from the DMK, probably didn't have much love for Ramayana. When this Ram Setu controversy happened, he said, and it was a wonderful humorous remark, he said, which engineering college did Ram get his degree from? Now, they are all laughing, but I hope I'm not killed for saying this tomorrow, right? Now, because this fear has come now. So, you can't even joke about your people. I mean, if you can't satirize your gods or your heroes, I think here is where I think some of the worries are. For the people, I agree with you. The opposition parties have been pusillanimous. I think they should have been much more courageous on all of this. And for God's sake, if you look at the writing of Harish Damodharan, who's one of our finest agricultural economists, you just read him in Indian Express, and you see how it is hurting our farmers. Our Hindu farmers are being hurt by this nonsense, right? So, and yeah.
But we have beef detection kits being made.
Maharashtra.
And when men are murdered and lynched, we send the meat for testing.
And this is where the Prime Minister should, it's not enough to go to Sabarmati Ashram once in 5 years and shed a few tears. That's not enough.
What would you expect him to do?
Again, he has to go against like Nehru and Gandhi to recognize what is in the larger interest of the country, not what stokes, the cadres.
One of your early chapters in this book talks about how Hindu personal law was reformed and Nehru's role in that and the debates at that time. And it's very interesting that you actually quote the lawyer for the Hindu Mahasabha. And how the argument is that if polygamy is going to be struck down in Hindu society, then why not for everybody? Now we're in 2017 and we're still having the triple talaq debate. Is this one of those moments where actually liberals or people who call themselves liberals are making a fatal mistake? That's actually, by not taking a position on triple talaq, and let me extend it and say, because as a feminist, I would say I support a uniform civil code.
Absolutely, absolutely. My last column in the Telegraph, published last Saturday, was about a memoir written by a remarkable Muslim modernist of Maharashtra called Syed Qadri Bhai, who has fought against triple talaq for the last 40 years. I met him in Pune recently. It's a wonderful book. It's published in English. And he was influenced by an even greater Muslim modernist called Hamid Dalwai, who tragically died in his early 40s. I think I have said this in the past, and in the context of your question, I'm going to have to say it again. Indian liberalism has suffered a double defeat. And the double defeat is this, that the tradition of Hindu liberalism, which extended from Ram Mohan Roy up till Nehru, is now jaded, weary, defeated, marginalized. And Muslim liberals have never enjoyed an honored or popular or influential place in the community. Hamid Dalwai was cast out. And I think this is a question every Indian has to ask himself or herself. Because of the column I wrote on Syed Bhai's book on his lifelong struggle with triple talaq, I'm getting abuse from Islamic fundamentalists for a change, including someone who from Saudi Arabia who assures me that women are very happy in Saudi Arabia. But he's a man himself, but that's a different question. So I don't know who he's talked to, right? So there is a real issue. This is really an issue, and our left parties, the TMC, the Congress party, have pandered to the most reactionary elements in the Islamic. When you have, Salman Khurshid not taking a stand against it. There's something seriously wrong. And again, Rajiv Gandhi could have undone this. One of the great missed opportunities of Indian democracy, for which we are all paying, Hindus, Muslims, all of us are paying, is when he did not support Arif Muhammad Khan in 1986, right? And it is
but wasn't the Shah Bano case the beginning of secular malpractices, or the opening of the blocks in Ayodhya, so that today when the Congress stands up and says, okay, listen, here's how we're different from the BJP, we're secular, that word is today corroded.
Totally. And on triple talaq, there should be no argument. We have to have a common civil code. There's no question. We have to. Liberals should fight. If you're so scared of being on the same side as the BJP, you have to do what is decent and right and just and equitable and democratic. Rajnath Singh's tweet today was fantastic, and I said so. I may never vote for the BJP in my life. That doesn't matter. But I think it has been a great failure of Indian liberals that they invent all kinds of complex, tortuous arguments to oppose a common civil code. And I think
mostly the argument is that it would be a Hindu code and not a civil.
It doesn't have to be. Leela said, Shabana Azmi, these are people who supported it. You get the best jurists in the country it doesn't have to be the code that was drafted in the 1940s by B.N. Rao and Ambedkar. It can be something else.
So one of the things you quote from the Constituent Assembly debates back then is that the Muslims would not have a problem, but you don't have the. I think you're quoting Kripalani, who says that the Muslims would not have a problem in accepting it, but you. Yeah. He's saying to the Congress, do not have the courage to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they, I think, you see, the tragedy is the BJP also doesn't believe in it.
In a uniform civil.
No, they raise it to spite the Muslims. That's it. And the BJP opposes it, the Congress opposes it, but the BJP is supporting it. No one has thought it through on sensible, reasonable grounds. There's a wonderful book written by my late friend Vasudha Dhanawar in 1985 called The Towards Uniform Civil Code, which lays out the arguments very clearly. And I think that is certainly, I think the young people in this room will have to take it forward.
So I want to come back, to pull you back, because you did refer to it as a bookend to Kashmir. Yeah. And one of the things you argued, not in this book but in one of your other books, was how you saw a parallel in what happened in Sri Lanka and Kashmir. And that was a very, very unusual analogy. So, I mean, I'm familiar with it, but you want to just speak about it?
I think, absolutely. I think, Sri Lanka and India are the two countries in Asia and Africa that have had a nearly 70-year experience of democracy. We had the emergency, and they had Rajapakshas. But through these 70 years, there's been discontent in one part. In Sri Lanka, a small part, the northern part, with us one state. And similar mistakes have been made. We have imprisoned popular leaders, they did it. We have rigged elections, they did it. Then on the side of those opposing the state, the rebels have gone from fighting a nationalist struggle to a holy crusade, to eliminating their own opponents. I mean, what Prabhakaran did in killing his rivals, is similar to what the jihadis in Kashmir did in killing the senior Nirvais or lone and NC workers. I mean, in the 90s, this is something that is not known among young people here, but there's a wonderful article by Anil Noria in Mainstream on this many years ago, when the jihad started in Kashmir in the 1990s. The main victims were National Conference, workers and panchayat heads, because they were Democrats loyal to the Indian Republic, right? So, and I think the inability to compromise. And there were times when when the Sri Lankans could have compromised. Prabhakaran was willing, he should have laid down his arms in 2004, he would have got a fantastic deal for the Tamils. And again, there have been times in Kashmir when things could have happened, where they could have been crossed. I think the BJP and the Congress have both been pernicious. In 2002-03, when Vajpayee had reached out, the Congress boycotted Vajpayee's speech in Sri Lanka. Fast forward to 2000,
he said insaniyat ke daire mein.
That's right. The Congress boycotted his speech. In 2007-08, when Manmohan Singh had started serious talks with Musharraf, the BJP blockaded the rally. Right now, so there are these similarities in which the large burden of blame falls on the state. But the rebels, both the Tamil rebels led by Prabhakaran and the Islamic jihadists led by Sayyid Salahuddin and others, their hands are also dirty and bloody. So this is, and we've not been able to, so in that sense I feel it's a dark stain on Sri Lankan nationalism and it's a dark stain on Indian nationalism. And that essay kind of expands on this. Yeah.
And you're saying it's a dark stain on Indian nationalism, but today most people, not necessarily me, would say to you that actually what's happening there is a stain on humanity. And you made it into this kind of...
I think because
there are sins of commission and omission by the Indian state, there's no doubt in that.
No doubt, it's like this.
But there is also an Islamist project taking shape in Kashmir.
And Pakistan has malign intentions. Yes. And Jayaprakash Narayan, who consistently sought peace in Kashmir, said this place will never be left in peace by Pakistan, which is why the Indian Republic must go the extra mile. I mean, he said this when Indira Gandhi had jailed Sheikh Abdullah. He said, release Sheikh Abdullah in 1967, let him in a popular election, and you will get the Kashmiris on the other side. So it's true that it will never be left in peace by Pakistan. Pakistan has become more and more fundamentalist. The old Sufism of Kashmir has disappeared, or it has become marginal or scared. So it's a very complex situation. And but again, small things. I mean, when the recent trouble started in Kashmir, right? When Mehbooba Mufti came first to Delhi after the killing of Burhan Wani and the protests, if Modi had met her, Modi didn't meet her, he followed her off to the Home Minister. Then a few months later, Yashwant Sinha went to the valley. One of your own senior BJP ministers went to give a healing touch. And he came back and asked for an appointment with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister did not give it. No, this what is the signal it sends to Kashmiris? That Narendra Modi does not even care for the views of Yashwant Sinha because he's talking to us. We don't want to talk to them. We only send you the pellet gun, that's it. So even when there's a small window, we have goofed. And by we, I mean mostly the Congress, because the Congress has been part a long time. And now the BJP is adding to this. And how long, I mean, there have been, you know, there have been opportunities where you could have sent a better governor. I mean, it will be suggested to this government, and I won't take names, but a governor who would have been credible in Kashmir was suggested to them. But because they don't have the imagination, the courage, the Congress didn't have the imagination or the courage either. And it is a stain on us. It is a stain on us that, you know, we have contributed. Of course, the Pakistanis have evil intentions, and I don't believe in practical diplomacy. Aman ki asha, forget it. You know, Pakistan is an Islamic fundamentalist country in which the army calls the shots, then the ISI calls the shots, and they only want to foment trouble in Kashmir. After the Afghan war, what started as a freedom struggle has become a totally jihadist thing. But there are people, or you only want that territory. If you want to reach out to them, you know, go to them. If the chief minister is coming and the prime minister won't, and this is your ally for God's sake. Yes. You know, so I think that from 1947, there have been a series of accumulated mistakes that the Delhi establishment has made, which has contributed to the problem. Pakistan will intensify it, exacerbate it, stoke trouble, and they are not a reliable, I don't believe, unlike what the Mirwais says or Hurriyat says, I believe we should just forget about Pakistan. But we should give Kashmiris justice, dignity and honor, and we should punish those who have abused their human rights, which includes our own parliamentary and our army. That we are a democracy.
That actually is an opening for a whole different conversation, but we don't have time. I'm going to ask one last question and open this up for the audience. You have been a pretty vocal critic of Narendra Modi. Is there something after these 3 years that you would give him credit for?
Well, he's totally self-made, which is not what can be said for his so-called principal rival. Right? He's got enormous energy. He works 24/7. That's all very impressive. But I feel that in his 3 years in power, those who thought that he would distance himself from the RSS because he had marginalized them in Gujarat, have had their eyes open. I mean, there's what I called, buyer syndrome, where you buy something and you feel that you've got something, bad. Buyer's remorse syndrome. So, I mean, one can name, if you look at what Sadanan Dhume or Tavleen Singh, and Gujarat Ras is slowly getting there. He's taking more time than the others, but he'll get there. It's called buyer's remorse. You thought here he's a reformer and he's a moderate, but that is, I think, as I said, my views are formed by what I know of the founding of this republic. We survived as a country because Gandhi and Nehru were determined not to make this a Hindu Pakistan. And one gave their life for it, one worked as hard as Narendra Modi for it, right? And as a biographer of Gandhi, I know it comes from inside me. One of the defining moments in my own life was going to Bhagalpur in 1989 after the riots there. And to see what my fellow Hindus did to the Muslim weavers of Bhagalpur, and after they were killed and displaced, to find that the state government of Bihar had done nothing for their succor. It was only the Jamaat and a rich Sikh merchant, a silk merchant, Muslim silk. I don't, just because, Saudi Arabia, if people say, what about go to Saudi Arabia? No, these are not the values of my country. My country is not Pakistan. My country is not Saudi Arabia. My country was built by Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi to be other than Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Right? So I feel that inside me. So
do you believe that we are in danger of, we
are becoming? We are in danger, but Narendra Modi has not done enough to assure me that he has distanced himself from MS Golwalkar. Now, by the way, the Indian Council of Philosophical Research wants to hold a seminar on Golwalkar. Please Google my name and Golwalkar or Jyotirmoy Sharma name and Golwalkar, and he was just a common garden variety bigot. This is the man who was the founder of RSS ideas. Narendra Modi has not done enough in these 3 years to show that he has outgrown those ideas. And that worries me, disappoints me, and makes me nervous.
And this notion of a Hindu Pakistan, since it's a phrase you've used.
And it is there, absolutely. I mean, it is, by the way, some of the people, Barkha, I mean, look at Muslims. Look at, Muslims are underrepresented in all sections of Indian society. In the professional classes, in the media, in academics, in the army. I mean, they are poor, vulnerable. Of course, they are captive to a horrific and despicable leadership, and they have to get out of that. Of course, they are succumbed to, women don't have autonomy and must fight for that. But to think that Muslims are privileged, I mean, it's just awful. And actually, among some sections of the Sangh Parivar, and this comes straight from Golwalkar, Christians are demonized as much as Muslims. Right? And I think this is, for me, this is not forget the India I was born in. This is not India I don't understand it. And I think in that sense, Narendra Modi has not done enough. Many people who voted for him, endorsed him, supported him, thought that he had outgrown the Hindutva chauvinism of his early political upbringing. Now, maybe he's outgrown it. I think one part of Narendra Modi wants to be a state leader, wants to leave a legacy, wants to be remembered in the way Jawaharlal Nehru was. But he can't take on the other forces in his party or the. I was born and raised in Uttar Pradesh. The U in Uttar Pradesh stands for ungovernable. And it would be ungovernable even if Adityanath was not there. But to think that Adityanath, a man with such narrow-minded, bigoted views, is the chief minister of our largest state, endorsed by our prime minister, does it tell you that this person has understood what Nehru and Gandhi and Ambedkar stood for? I'll leave it as an open question.
Okay, let's take that open question straight into the audience. Please raise your hand and wait for. Is there someone with a mic? Yeah, okay. I will start here in the second row with this young girl. Yes.
Being from the field of academia and also understanding very well the importance of participatory democracy, how open do you think are the doors of bureaucrats and policymakers for the think tanks in India or the research community in India at present, especially when you compare it to, say, the close association of the government in the US and the work that the think tanks do there? And what is the solution that you suggest for that?
That's a very good question, and it gives me a chance to get beyond Narendra Modi and criticize the Congress again.
Jairam's leaving on cue.
I think Manmohan Singh, as Prime Minister in 10 years, could have done much more to professionalize the civil service. He made two great appointments, Nandan Nilekani and Raghuram Rajan. There should have been 200 or two, they're both remarkable people. But I think we are becoming a knowledge-proof government. And the state governments are worse. You need expert knowledge in health, in education, in energy, in environment. Jairam, unfortunately, has gone out, but he was a few ministers who consulted real experts. And Jairam, as Environment Minister, got India's finest ecologist, Madhav Gadgil, to write a very good report, which was scuttled by the contractor lobby. Right? But in that sense, we have to do more. And Manmohan Singh is a great missed opportunity. Morarji Desai was the only Prime Minister who got in experts at top levels. And I think a lot more needs to be done there.
Okay. Next, yes, here in the yes.
Initial remarks, you said that assassination of Mahatma Gandhi saved India. You said that the Hindus were horrific and Patel and Nehru buried the differences. Do you think that what we saw in 2014, the Hindus of the 50s and 60s were some sort of in guilt of killing the Mahatma? That was the reason right could not succeed in 50s and 60s. Otherwise, we could have seen what we saw in 2014.
No, absolutely. I think to a large, there were no serious communal riots from 47 to 63. 63 after the Hazratbal relic issue, and then there were riots against Hindus in East Pakistan, which led to retributive violence against Muslims in Eastern and Central India. So, but this is arguable. I don't want to say, if Gandhi had lived 5 or 10 years more, but I think people were horrified. And Nehru and Patel, one of the great things, and I hope one of the contributions of my book was to show that Nehru and Patel were partners in the building of a united and democratic India. They were not rivals. They had disagreements, but they had their shared values. You know, the tragedy of India is that they become posthumous rivals. As Gopal Krishna Gandhi so wisely says, the Congress disowned Patel because only the Nehru Gandhis could have been praised, right? The Congress disowned Patel and the BJP misowned Patel. I think in that sense, they were extraordinary figures. I mean, what they did between 47 and 50, and not just my book, read Rajmohan Gandhi's biography of Patel, and you get a sense of this. So they gave us those 15 years to consolidate the country. I mean, in a sense, Gandhi, by the way, Gandhi himself said this more than once. Through my assassination, I may be able to bring Hindus and Muslims together. He said it in 1909 in South Africa. So it's entirely possible.
Can I ask you how far you think the liberal political tradition that flourished in the late 19th and then the first half of the 20th century, how far do you think that has continued since 1947?
Well, I think with ups and downs, Patrick. I think, again, this is probably a separate discussion, but something you've not mentioned, and your question allows me to mention, is liberalism in India, before, apart from facing the challenge from right-wing Hindu majoritarianism and Islamic fundamentalism, also faced an intellectual challenge from Marxism. And when I was growing up, intellectually, in the early 1980s, you know, Marxists were dominant through many Indian academic institutions, and they had contempt for liberals. And you know, in that sense, they were fighting that rearguard battle. But I think now they're coming up again. I think they are some of our finest thinkers today. I mean, if you look at the writings of Pratap Bhanu Mehta, Sunil Khelnani, you know, Devesh Kapoor is here, Nirja Jayal. I mean, so I think hopefully Marxism, I think intellectually, are historians. I mean, the best young historians today, Nanjot, of my generation, are not Marxists. They were a generation before mine. I mean, Nanjot Lahiri, Upinder Singh, Sanjay Subramaniam. So intellectually, liberals seem to have marginalized the Marxists. But in society at large, you know, it's of course a different question. And I mean, so in that sense, because Marxism, again, it's very difficult for young people to understand this. The enchantment that Marxism held in the 50s, and the 60s, and the 70s, right? It liberated China. I mean, Vietnam conquered, defeated America because of the heroism of the Marxist cadres, right? So I think, in retrospect, somehow the moral ascendancy that Marxism achieved over liberalism, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and Indira Gandhi intensified it because she did the communists to support her in parliament. The communists captured all the public institutions, you know, and I think this is a history waiting to be written. But I think among younger Indian scholars, at least, I can only speak for scholars, among the younger Indian scholars today, the best, the most original work is not done by Marxists. It's certainly not done by Hindutva-vadis, because the Hindutva-vadi scholar may be an oxymoron. It's done by liberals of different shapes and you know, and tendencies.
Red t-shirt, and I'll come back.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll take maybe 2-3 more questions. Yeah.
Are Hindus ready for a uniform civil code? Are Hindus ready for a uniform civil code?
You know, I can't answer that question because I have not done a survey or analysis. But I think again, you know, it's reason and justice demand. I mean, people object to the term uniform because you can call it common civil code or residences. It's true that when Ambedkar and Nehru reformed the Hindu personal laws in the 1950s to give women rights they had never enjoyed before, including the right to divorce, to marry outside their caste, to own property, it was the Hindus who opposed. It was the RSS. In 1 year, the RSS organized 149 demonstrations against Ambedkar. They claim Ambedkar now, by the way. 149. And they set up a Hindu scholar called Swami Karpatri Maharaj, who, by the way, was a hero of L.K. Advani. You know, you look at it. To say, who is this man? He's an untouchable, he knows no Sanskrit. How the hell can he rewrite our codes? Right. So they weren't prepared, and then, but Nehru and Ambedkar made them, and others made them prepared. So I think we need a movement of liberals, Hindus and Muslims. You know, how it will come about? But I think reason and justice demand a common civil code. and it has to be based on best practices. It has to have the finest jurists. I mean, Ambedkar and B.N. Rao were both clearly were 70 years out of date. They are remarkable people. I mean, B.N. Rao, who also helped write the Constitution, he deserves a biography, by the way. He's one of the great forgotten heroes of Indian democracy. But I think, you know, liberals should certainly fight for it. That is a different question.
Okay,
what is right and what is feasible to the
Let's move on.
Fun of Hindutva scholarship, but skimming through the news these days, you see a very steady and progressive rationalization of the most absurd arguments that is put forward by the Hindutva side. And I see it among my relatives, I see it among my friends. And in such an atmosphere, I wonder how you're so optimistic about the ideas of Nehru and Ambedkar winning. Who will wage this battle? And how will it come to a rescue?
You know, I can't tell who is winning, who will win. I can't. But what I'm saying is, these reactionary, medievalist, patriarchal, majoritarian ideas will not go uncontested, and they are not going uncontested. And it may be that the challenge will come from outside the political parties, because it's hard. I mean, if the state of opposition is really despairing, you know. But you know, and India is a large country with many states, and there are many. As I said, if you travel through Karnataka and Kerala, you may be slightly more optimistic than if you travel through UP and Haryana, right? Okay. Now, so the battle will continue. The contest will continue. No one can say what will happen 20, 30, 40 years from now. But, you know, you'll have to fight it. I won't be around.
All right. Earlier on in the evening, there was a conversation about individual liberties versus larger social sentiment. And you rightly pointed out, I'm from Tamil Nadu, so I know that it isn't necessarily larger social sentiment. There are people who think differently and who feel differently. However, given that the media is what it is today and the Congress has become what it has become today, how do you suppose we can echo those larger sentiments that are not necessarily Hindutva in its nature? How do we bring those out, and what could we possibly do?
Sadly, thank you for your question, and I understand and empathize with your anxieties. Unfortunately, you know, I don't prescribe. You know, I write, I analyze, I try and write in accessible language, try to get wrong, but I can't tell young people. I mean, I failed with my children, I'll fail with everyone else. So I've learned from that. But I just say, read widely, open your mind. I've praised many people of my generation, so I better praise some older people. Read the Constituent Assembly debates that are online. Read the works of the great, the person I regard as my mentor, who's around still, but not well enough to come today, the great sociologist Andre Bete. Read his writings on what it means to construct a deeper and more meaningful liberalism for India today, right? And read widely, take lessons around the world. Travel is a great educator. In January of this year, I traveled to 8 states of our union. And when I was young, I used to travel. Then I became, lazy, or I wouldn't travel that much. And what it does to you to go to different parts of India. Let me give one example. So people are accusing me of being too optimistic. Okay, now let me give you what I found in these travels. And this is very interesting. I was invited by the Maharashtra Foundation, which I'd never heard of, for a function in Pune. The Maharashtra Foundation, in association with a Marathi magazine called Sadhana, founded by the great reformist Sane Guruji, whom you should Google, by the way. Okay. They asked me to be, and they have an annual event. The Maharashtra Foundation is progressive, wealthy Maharashtrian NRIs. And every year they have an event with the Marathi magazine Sadhana to honor 6 achievers. 3 Lifetime Achievement Award, 3 young people, or in their 30s or 40s. Social work, literature, culture, which includes music and theatre, right? It was extraordinary. Now, I'm a Tamil, and the Tamil NRIs are the most prosperous in America. They've done bugger all for Tamil Nadu. I don't think it was honored to achieve it. No, the Gujarati Hindu NRIs, you know what they do. I don't need to want to detail. No, it's extraordinary. I mean, it was a complete eye-opener for me. And in Maharashtra, you had this, and absolutely remarkable people were being honored.
You know, an Adivasi called Devaji Tufa from Gadchiroli, who has organized more than 200 village community forest committees. Right. Now, so these are things going on. I mean, there are people, so if you travel, not only you will learn more about your country, you'll ask more questions, you'll become less pessimistic.
Sorry, how do we translate?
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm on the clock. Last question. And we'll go.
I have a very simple and short question. That what exactly are your views on the reservation? Are you for and against, or against it?
You see, I don't believe in for and against. I don't believe in black and white thinking. Alright. I wrote an essay many years ago, which still may be on my website, The Telegraph, arguing that some amount of reservation is absolutely necessary because we're a deeply unequal hierarchical society. I think Dalits and Adivasis, which is what the Constitution mandated, so we need some amount of reservation. I think 50% is probably too much, 25 or 30 would be adequate. I think we also need to be much more scrupulous about creamy layer, about one generation, you know, there are things that we don't apply. But in a society as unequal as ours, we need maybe a slightly less reservation, more focused, but we absolutely need affirmative action. You know, I think I was a supporter of Sonia Gandhi's sadly failed attempt to have 33% reservation for women in our assembly. So I think, you know, if you look at what reservation has done to Dalits, it has made, I mean, it has created an entrepreneurial class, a professional class, it's given them dignity, honor, role models. There's still a long way to go. But it has to be done differently, better. Again, there's a great, all of you have access to the internet. There's a great essay by Andre Bete, who I've already mentioned. Andre Bete, B-E-T-I-L-L-E, half French, half Bengali and wholly Indian. The greatest living Indian scholar, and you got it from me. Right. There's a great essay by him called Distributive Justice and Institutional Well-Being, published in the Economic and Political Weekly in 1991. Distributive Justice and Distributive Justice and Institutional Well-Being, which will give you answers much better and more robust than mine. He also has a great essay called On Constitutional versus Populist Democracy. So the important thing is the nuance and the complexity. Some things are clearly bad. Killing someone for eating something is bad. Absolutely. But most policy judgments, you know, are nuanced, are complex. And it's the balance that is important. So I have absolutely no doubt that India, because of its deep hierarchy and inequality on the lines of caste and gender, needs some affirmative action for Dalits and women. How much, in what quantum, in what way, that is for legal and sociological experts to decide.
One thing this evening tells us is that you can actually have a conversation on a range of subjects without shouting, without getting into a fight, right? I wish one of my colleagues in the TV industry would understand that as well. Ram, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.